Hello, we are going to discuss what is binding in this video. What is binding? What do you mean by binding? So, binding means resolving function call with function body is called as binding. Resolving function call with function body. Resolving function call with function body is called as binding. This is very important because people can answer what is early binding, what is late binding. But when the question is asked what is binding, they are not able to answer. So first of all, you must know what do you mean by binding. So resolving function call with the function body is called as binding. How many types of bindings are there? Two types, early binding and late binding. Early binding and late binding. So what do you mean by early binding? Early binding means resolving function call with function body at the compile time. So compiler resolves, compiler decides whenever you call any function, whenever you call any method, which method or which function body should get executed. That compiler decides. That is called as early binding. Since compiler decides for a function call which function body should be used, it is called as early binding. And late binding means resolving function call with function body at runtime. So when compiler does not decide, compiler leaves it up to runtime to decide which function body should be executed for a function call. It is known as late binding. Since function call is resolved with the function body during runtime, it is called as late binding. And here function call is resolved with the function body at the compile time, so it is early binding. Okay, hope that is clear. What is binding? Now, before we conclude, how do we call? Because we have a separate videos for early binding and late binding. Okay, so in this video we are just learning what is binding. But before I conclude, uh, I just would like to show you how do we invoke a method in Java. So how do we invoke a method in Java? We invoke a method using, and here we are talking about non-static method, not static method. I will explain you what do you mean by we are not talking about static method, but here we are talking about non-static method, instance method, non-static method. How do we invoke? Reference dot method. Sometimes we pass parameter or sometimes we don't pass. So this is the syntax. Now here, when compiler encounters this line, whether compiler decides that this call should go to which body of the method. If compiler decides that, it is early binding. If compiler does not decide, compiler leaves it up to runtime that you call some method and which body should be executed. If compiler does not decide that, compiler leaves it up to runtime, JVM, then that is called as late binding. And when compiler decides, yes, you call a method and for this method call, a particular method body should be used. When compiler decides that, that is called as early binding. Hope this is clear. Thank you.